While I have you, I have to ask you about some of your comments during the period where Donald Trump and his allies were trying to overthrow the lawful election. As you know, that's a big issue. I showed some of your involvement. Here you were on December 14th speaking about the elector fraud, which, as you know, has now been charged in many states. You referred to it as, and I want to be accurate, a, quote, alternate slate of electors. December 14th, 2020. Take a listen.
We have more than enough time to right the wrong of this fraudulent election result and certify Donald Trump as the winner of the election. As we speak today, an alternate slate of electors in the contested states is going to vote, and we're going to send those results up to Congress.
You were quite clear on air about that. We have the headlines about all the different states with independent, separate authorities, separate jurisdictions, you know, federalism. But they've all moved towards the same issue, Stephen, and I want to be very clear. You're not named as a defendant in these cases. But the people doing what you were talking about in that clip, which you clearly had knowledge of in advance, the people who were committing or attempting to commit elector fraud against their state or the national government in states that you know Donald Trump lost, appealed all the way to the Supreme Court and lost, those are now being dealt with as criminal cases. What do you say to your prior role on that? And can you tonight, you disclaim 2025, can you disclaim these kind of efforts in the next election or not?
So of all of the most ridiculous communist lawfare schemes, surely at the top of the list is going after Republican lawyers and Republican activists who served as alternate electors so that Congress on January 6 could lawfully and in the due course of their duties consider election fraud claims. It is a patriotic act for a citizen to volunteer themselves to stand as an alternate elector so that Congress can hear and consider claims of illegality and unconstitutionality in the states, and then Congress can decide if they want to ratify those claims or not.
Well, I'll jump in. I'll let you finish, but I'm just going to say fact check false. That's fact check false. Elector fraud is a crime, and each of these cases will be adjudicated individually.
What is the fraud? Is it your contention that the Michigan alternate electors were not self-described as alternate electors? They held press conferences. Everybody said these are alternate electors. They're going to be considered by Congress.
Okay, I'm going to address you, and then I'm going to let you have time to respond, Stephen. As you know, there are some states where there was careful language about saying if a court decision or something changed the outcome. That was one thing. There were many states, as you know, and this is why there are cases where people not only on the 14th, but all the way up and through January 6th, continued to maintain that in states they lost, they wanted to be the fraudulent representative of a victory, and they lost. And as you know, submitting false information in election context or other context to the government is fraud.
Is it? Do you really believe, as you sit there today, that there was ever any doubt or question as to which was the slate of electors that the state had chosen versus which was the alternate slate of electors being sent to Congress?
Stephen, again, respectfully, that's the whole, Stephen, respectfully, again, we want to have this dialogue, but respectfully, that's the whole problem. That you, and we showed you on air talking about it, and your team and your plan was to create that doubt and then use it as a pretext to overthrow the certification on January 6th. And so people are asking, are you going to, I'll let you finish. I've given you a lot of time. Stephen, people are asking, are you going to do that again this cycle, this election? Go ahead.
Again, there's not a more clear-cut case in the country of the ruthless weaponization of government against innocent people than going after people who stood up patriotically and volunteered themselves to be alternate electors so that Congress could perform its duties under the Electoral Count Act. Why did they change the Electoral Count Act? Specifically because they knew and understood that every action that was taken was consistent with the letter and text of the law. And if you want to talk about democracy, because you brought up the issue, and yes, I am going to go back there, about the ebb and flow of illegal immigration. Here's what matters.
We gave time to that. I have limited time. I've given you a lot of time. I'm not going back to immigration. Take a listen to what Trump allies were saying about the vice president at the time on this topic. Take a listen to Epstein and others. Take a listen.
The remedy was for Vice President Pence's, the quarterback in the Green Bay sweep, to remand those votes back to the 6 battleground states.
The vice president's got a lot of power, and that's very important to recognize.
If Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election.
you sat with the January 6th committee, and I should mention you participated. Some other people didn't. That's part of the rule of law. They wrote that on the morning of January 6th, the president spoke with you, Stephen Miller, about what he would say hours later. At 11:30 a.m., Stephen Miller's assistant emailed the speechwriting team, and we can put this up, reinsert the Mike Pence lines. The final written draft had the following Pence reference, quote, "And we will see whether Pence enters history as a truly great and courageous leader." So your position then, and you worked directly with Donald Trump that day, was arguing that the call was ultimately up to Pence. Is that right? To the vice president?
By definition, that's true. And I know you want to go over this ground again and again and again, and that's fine. Axiomatically, that's true, because that's why Congress came back and revised the law to make the vice president's role ceremonial rather than official, which it was in the original version. This whole entire, all this nonsense, all the lies, all the hoaxing about this, January 6th and the days leading up to it was a legal process to raise objections to Congress. Congress, if those objections were validated, would then send back to the states the opportunity to ratify an alternate slate of elections.
It's a legal about that. I'm familiar with that. You said again and again, just to be clear, this is your first time on this program. So it's not again and again for us discussing it. This is us discussing newsworthy items that I don't know that you've always been asked about. So if you thought the vice president has that role and that's legal, and you've just emphasized that, and that stems from the Constitution, then I guess you must be fine with Vice President Harris making the call this January.
Again, there's not just the vice president. The Congress itself has to vote on and ratify these propositions as well, too. So there's a role for the Congress, the House, the Senate.
But you're good with Vice President Harris doing it this time, because you wrote that in the speech. Yeah, go ahead.
More importantly, Ari, they rewrote the law. They rewrote the law. So the vice president's role has now been downgraded from official to ceremonial. But I just want to underscore.
So you do feel differently. If Pence is the vice president, it's fine. If Harris is the vice president, it's not. I mean, that's what you're saying now. Again, people want to know what you think as they make their decisions about what to vote for. Go ahead.
They rewrote the law. Look, I care about my democracy every bit as much, if not more, than you.
I'm just trying to get answers from you. We're not in a personal dispute about democracy credentials. You wrote that in. You wrote that in on Pence. You played it all the way up to January 6th. You know what happened after that. A lot of other people have been convicted of crimes, Stephen. A lot of innocent people have been persecuted by a corrupt system. What kind of corrupt system throws Republican lawyers in jail for offering good, sound legal advice, but does nothing with secretaries of state who plainly violated their own state laws and constitutions? How many people are in jail right now? Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are the #1 traffickers of children, girls into sex slavery on planet Earth. Okay. How many people are in jail for that? We've gone this far, and we've gone this far in an exchange. We're not doing just anything you want to rip off the internet that's false, and we're not doing defamation here. As you know, there's other Trump allies who've gotten a lot of trouble for that. We're not doing that here. You want to talk about democracy. You sound right now. I'll let you respond. We are running over on time, but you sound more outraged about what. Stephen, I'm going to finish the question. I'll give you time. You sound tonight more outraged about what you allege is that double standard, and I've given you time to explain it, than the people who battered the cops and led to deaths and stormed the Capitol. I know in your deposition, because I looked at it, you said you were against the violence. You haven't gotten around to saying that here tonight. Again, it's your time when you answer. But you sound more outraged about that than the actual convicted sedition at the Capitol that day, which, by the way, Donald Trump has floated the idea that he would pardon the seditionists who stormed the Capitol violently. We're running over on time. I will give you a chance to respond to all that.
Yes. I, President Trump, and everyone else have been repeatedly clear about the fact that any violence that took place was unacceptable. That is completely separate and different from throwing a grandmother in jail for 5 years who just said a prayer in a hallway after being ushered in by a Capitol police officer and then left. The weaponization of the government. There's a guy who posted a meme about Hillary Clinton who's in jail right now, Mackey. The weaponization of government is the beginning of the end of American democracy. And every one of your viewers and listeners should understand, when you have a country where you can throw people in jail for violations of misinformation, for engaging in free speech, for engaging in good legal advice, for challenging illegitimate election results, you're not a free country anymore. Right. And I'll tell you the violence I'm outraged about. Right now, there are moms whose daughters are dead and murdered because Kamala Harris let in their killers. And when you have on your program the mother of Jocelyn Nungry, or the mother of Laken Riley, or the mother of any of the other victims, the mother of the girl who was raped in Central Park, any of those families, then you'll be in a position to talk about violence and suffering and death.
I told you I'd give you time. We're not doing a comparison of me to you on everything, but we've given you time so people could hear, as you said, directly from you. That's something we do here, and we've given you a lot of time, and I appreciate the dialogue. Stephen Miller from the Trump campaign and the Trump White House veteran. Thank you, sir.